Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Hi, and welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Layla, and Chelle and I are starting a 7-part series on deities. We'll be discussing the concept of the triple god and the triple goddess, often called the youth, warrior sage, and maiden mother crone. And for this episode, we'll be starting out with the youth, the young god.
I'm Chelle, and I want to point out that people might be befuddled at the moment, and they might say, well, Layla said 7 and only mentioned 6. Well, we are also going to add in the 4th face of the goddess.
Sometimes called the hidden face or the dark face of the goddess.
And that's how we come up with 7. So strap in, because we are starting with the god. Why? Because everybody starts with the goddess. So we're starting with the god. A lot of folks, I think, may not be as familiar with the triple aspects of the god. And I think that's why we thought that this would be an important concept for us to explore, because we oftentimes think of the god and the triple goddess. And I do think that sometimes the triple aspects of the god do get forgotten or fall by the wayside.
Part of that is because the triple aspect of the god is much newer. It's a much newer concept than the triple aspect of the goddess. The triple aspect of the goddess follows the moon phases, right? The waxing, the full, and the waning moons. And then, of course, there's the 4th face, the dark moon or the new moon face of the goddess. And so that's talked about a lot. And if you go back to like Robert Graves and his book, The White Goddess, he talks about a triple goddess. And that's 1948, so that's pretty old. But most of the time, they would talk about the dual aspect of the god. And you touched on that a little bit, Chelle. The Oak King and the Holly King. And these are particularly Wiccan concepts. These very much came from Wicca.
True. But I sometimes look at the triple aspect, of the god. You had said we've looked at the triple aspects of the goddess as far as the moon reference.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I have looked at the same thing with the god as the rising sun, the high sun, and the setting sun.
The triple god thing, this is one of the things I looked up, because if you look online, you can't find anything prior to 2011 of people talking about the triple god.
Not really, yeah.
No, so you have to really kind of dig into your library. And the first places you're going to see the triple god mentioned is actually 2 books, and they both came out in 1989. And they are The Witch's God by Janet and Stewart Farrar.
Love it.
And they explicitly state the youth, warrior, and sage aspects of the god. And also Wicca, the Old Religion in the New Age by Vivian Crowley. And those came out in the same year. And those are the first times where the triple aspect of the god is explicitly stated.
Okay, I gotta make a left turn here because I just thought of something hysterical.
What's that?
So the whole weird thing that we had with the whole 10,000 Goddesses book, and there was no such thing, and we remembered it as that?
Yeah.
Same thing with this Janet and Stewart Farrar book, The Witch's God. If you would have asked me what that book was called, I would have told you 10,000 Gods, because I thought it was 10,000 Goddesses and 10,000 Gods, and apparently it's not.
Nope.
But this would have been the partner to that book that doesn't exist.
But the idea of goddess and god in triplicate is very important to Wicca and to a lot of different types of witchcraft. And even if you don't adhere to Wiccan beliefs, the concepts are valid. The concepts of growth and change and seasons of your life is really what they're talking about. So you have the goddess, maiden mother crone. And again, particularly in Celtic folklore, which is where a lot of original Wiccan ideas about the god, the horned god, Cernunnos, came from, they have the god of the seasons, right? They have 2 seasons, the light half of the year and the dark half of the year, the growing season and the dying season.
Kind of when we had the Oak King and Holly King story.
Exactly. But even they talk about the baby, the god being born, and the young god as a child. So they don't explicitly state it, but
In
he's
his
still,
rising sun
that's
phase.
right. He's still kind of mentioned in there, but it wasn't really formalized until Vivian Crowley and Janet and Stewart Farrar talking about this idea of the triple god. I love that because it does mirror the goddess, and you do have to have that balance in energies.
And I do agree with everything you've said, but I do feel that if you do look back in some of the literature that you can find, those triple aspects of the god were acknowledged.
They're there, yeah.
They just weren't labeled as such. Whereas with the goddess, they were labeled that way.
If you go back to, like, say, the Spiral Dance, and that came out in 1979, early. And Starhawk, who wrote the Spiral Dance, does talk about aspects of the god. And she does talk about him mirroring the triple goddess. She doesn't explicitly say it, but it is implied. And the seasons of the god and the seasons of life are talked about. And again, they like to emphasize the two sides of the god, but they do still talk about the young god, the growing god, the youth that we're going to talk about today. Even though he's not really explicitly called like a part of a triplicate, the young god is still talked about in a lot of these older books, like the Spiral Dance.
Acknowledged, but not labeled as such.
Exactly.
So tonight we're going to explore the youth aspect of the god, that rising sun energy. I kind of look at this aspect as the buildup, that little baby son born, making his way to adulthood.
Oh, see, now I see him more as a mischievous teen.
Okay.
I see the young god as more of a later teens getting ready to go to college age.
Like a chaotic teenager.
A chaotic teenager, almost ready to be into adulthood, but not quite. I guess I do see him as the baby around Yule. But in my mind, he goes straight from being the baby at Yule to being like that young, chaotic teenager immediately afterwards.
Well, I could see, both of those things within this particular aspect,
Absolutely,
kind of that.
yeah. He does contain both of those for sure. All of that, the whole range of it, I think.
Kind of that starting out, like you said, that little Yule baby who hasn't made it to his Beltane phase yet. He's got that little growing season.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the god as aspects of a wheel, like aspects of the wheel of the year, it is cyclical. The whole idea of the god is he's born, he grows up, he becomes the lover of the goddess, the father of her child. He becomes the wise elder sage, and then he becomes the god of death and gives himself in sacrifice to go within and become the baby in the goddess's womb and be born again, and the whole wheel starts.
Similar to the maiden, mother, and crone.
Exactly. So the youth aspect encompasses everywhere from that moment of conception in the womb all the way to that moment just before he becomes the warrior, the father.
Right.
So he's
right.
still connected to death even on that one side of it.
Exactly like the triple goddess aspect. Same thing. When we think of the god, and I think what maybe quote unquote society thinks of as the god is really kind of more that middle aspect, that warrior father aspect. And I think that you really don't hear a lot about the youth or the sage aspect much.
I mean, there's Odin. People like the whole idea of Odin as the big god with the beard and the patch, and he's in charge of everything.
I see him as like the sage.
I see him that way too. And not to get sidetracked from the young god, but I just brought up Odin to point out that he is more proof that the dual aspect of the god, the father warrior and sage death aspects, those two aspects are still more popular than the idea of the young growing god.
Like you said, with Odin in that sage aspect, he kind of does represent that wisdom and that knowledge, so to say. Whereas the youth aspect, youth is the beginnings and the growth of things. Usually when I think of the youth god, I almost think of crops. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, spring. He's all about Imbolc and Ostara.
And things like just bursting out of the ground. I have visions. When I think of the youth god, I think of things like just shooting out of the ground. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Me too. Absolutely. He is that god of growth. He's that god of potential. He's that god of absolute beginnings.
But uncertainty.
Yes, he's the fool. He's the fool. He's that careless youth who's a little prepared, but he's ready to take a step off the cliff and he's not even looking where he's going.
Just like the Fool card in the tarot.
Yep, just like that. And I love thinking of it like that, that whole cycle. He is that youth that's starting the fool's journey. He is that young God that's ready to step off into the unknown and to start this whole wheel of the year.
When I think of youth gods, or maybe youth god isn't the right word, I think of soul. And I think that's just because of the whole sun aspect.
And Bel's another one. Yeah, the god Bel, because, Beltane, he is the god of fire and the god of sun, and he's very youthful.
I know that with Soul is part of a Christmas festival, so it kind of goes with the whole baby Yule thing. But I think it's just mainly because for me, a sun god, that little baby sun, I don't know why I think of the youthful as a little baby. I'm sorry. But that little baby sun. So that's really kind of when I'm thinking of or trying to work with a youthful aspect of the god. Soul is kind of where I start with.
Even in our practice, we tended to ignore the youth aspect of the god in favor
We
of
did.
the Oak King and the Holly King. And so when we did think of that youth aspect, we thought of the pregnant goddess. We thought
Right.
of the god in her belly. And then we thought of him being born at Yule. That makes a lot of sense that you see him as the baby because that's what's really emphasized a lot.
It's funny you say that because I'm thinking back to the last time I worked with Soul, and it was around the time that I ironically found myself being the goddess in that story,
And you had yourself pregnant with a son that you had asked the gods for. I remember
who was
that.
born right around in bulk.
Right, perfect. Yes, exactly. The youthful God time, that
Right.
spring energy, that beginning energy. And now we've kind of danced around this a little bit. And I just want to point out for our listeners that the goddess is very closely associated to the moon. We talk
Yes.
about the phases of the moon, mirror the phases of the goddess, mirror a person's life stages. And we've mentioned it a couple times, but I want to point out specifically that the god is very much tied to the sun
The sun. Yep.
in this tradition. There are other traditions that will flip that and they'll have the goddess associated with the sun and the god associated with the moon. But in a lot of pagan and Wiccan and witchcraft traditions, it's goddess moon, god sun. And he follows that cyclical nature, that solar, seasonal, year-long cycle where he's born at Yule, he grows up, he becomes the consort of the goddess at Beltane, and then he dies at Samhain. So yeah, he has a very cyclical nature, much like the goddesses, but his is a whole year. His follows the solar yearly cycle, and hers follows the monthly lunar
Monthly
cycle.
lunar. Yep. And I think that maybe, also kind of the elephant in the room. I think that sometimes the reason that not only the god in general, but the three aspects of the god sometimes get washed over. A lot of people do find themselves on this path as recovering Christians. And I think that sometimes there is a fear of working with the god, or they're almost put off by diving into the God, let alone the aspects of the God. And that made me think of Christianity actually also has its own triple aspect of the God.
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that even if you are a recovering Christian, that you're only giving yourself 50% of the magic if you're only working with 50% of the magic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that people would very much find that if you are apprehensive about working with the God, that you may find comfort delving in, starting with working with each aspect, starting with that sweet baby sun God.
Yeah, that youthful, energetic, excited to do new things sun god. Yeah, that's perfect.
Can I tell you something horrible? All I can
Sure.
think of right now is that little sun baby in Teletubbies, where the sun in the sky was a big
Aw.
baby face.
Yeah, no, that's cute. That's a very cute way to think of it. And that is a very accessible and easy way to get into working with the god. When I got into witchcraft, when I read the Spiral Dance and realized that deity didn't just have to be one god, one sky daddy telling you what to do, but that there was feminine energy involved as well. There was goddess, and you had to have that balance. And the idea of it was so attractive to me. I was so drawn to that. And so a lot of people are drawn to finding out as much as they can about that goddess, that feminine side. This is energy that we all possess in different levels. And just like you said, Shell, we have to have all
The
of it.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah, there has to be some type of balance within you. And that's what these books, particularly a lot of the older ones, were saying. They were saying that you have to have both. They were saying that duality is important.
Right.
Even though there was a lot of Wicca in them that I no longer follow, that idea of duality in the universe, of balance, of finding that in all things, that really appeals to me. You know, I came for the goddess, but I stayed for the goddess and the god. That duality is very important.
The yin and the yang.
Recently, I've started working with Odin. That wasn't my fault. It happened.
I love that.
So
Wasn't my fault.
it wasn't, but it all started. Okay, we got to go on a sidetrack.
Left turn.
Left turn, and it's Odin's fault. I'm blaming him.
That's because you talked about him in the sage, and now he's here. And
Now
okay,
he's
we
here.
go.
Crystal City Circle, my wonderful, amazing, awesome pagan community in Corning, New York. Absolutely fabulous group of people. We just recently did our Samhain celebration.
Jealous. Keep going.
It was amazing. These are people of all different levels of practicing. We have people who've been practicing for a very long time. We have people who are new, different traditions, and it just all blends beautifully together. And we got together to decide how we wanted to do our Samhain ritual. And the group decided that we wanted to call the Norse deities of Hel and Odin.
Ooh. Yikes. Jeez.
Uh-huh.
Damn, I missed this.
And Odin immediately said, "You're calling me, Layla." And I said, "Okay." Because that's all you really can say at that point.
See, you're so much better than I am because I would have been like, why?
No, I did not want to say why. I just said, okay.
That's why I find myself in trouble sometimes.
Yeah. And then, of course, I found myself going down a rabbit hole of research and meditation and working with Odin. But it was very, very good and it was very fabulous. But I just want to give a shout out to Crystal City Circle. And thanks, guys, because now I'm working with Odin and it's all your fault. But I also want to give a particular shout out to Shannon, who is my partner in crime for this. Thank you so, so much. You're amazing. Couldn't do it without you.
She
So
is pretty
thankful.
fabulous, by
Oh my
the
gosh,
way.
she's freaking fantastic. I could not have asked for a better person to start
I
this with.
already love her.
I know, isn't she great? I adore her. There's also one other person that I want to shout out, and this is Matt.
Matt, thank you so much for including me. It makes me want to cry.
So Matt says his love language is giving, and he is not kidding. He brought to our Samhain feast riches from his farm. He brought us eggs and feathers, Shell. Actually, okay, I stole the feathers, but I have I looked at them and I was like, oh, look at these feathers. He actually has stories. I know what birds these feathers came from, and it is the coolest thing.
That's very cool.
Right? I saw them and thought that they were perfect, and I already have magical projects planned for every single one of them. Now, part of the reason I'm bringing up Matt is he's about to become a dad, and so he has that father energy, that father God, but I can still see the optimism, the positivity, the growth, the growing things. I mean, he works with the land for fuck's sake.
But he's on the precipice of going to the next phase.
I think he's already there. The responsibility, the wisdom is already there. I can just see the hints of the youth God that was once there. You know what I'm saying?
You can see it fading away.
But that's a sad way to put it, but yeah. But growing into something more. How's that? Growing into...
Right.
And that's what all of this is about, is phases, the phases of your life. And that's what it's supposed to mirror, is the seasons, how you relate to the seasons, how your life relates to the gods. And so, like, Matt, I'm so sorry, but like
She's
Matt, going from the young god to the father god, these are phases of life that we should acknowledge. Whether this matches your gender or not, I don't care. We all go through these in different ways, and we all express this in different ways, but we all go through phases and stages of our life, and that's what these deity stories and aspects are supposed to teach us.
Wow, Matt, now that we've talked about you.
There you go. Now that we've had our left turn.
Again, thank you so much. You are such a sweetheart. I appreciate you.
Man, he brought vanilla that he made.
How can you hate that?
I can't. But everybody is so cool. People were doing readings. We pulled runes. They cast circle. Everyone was so supportive and so wonderful. And I got a book and I'm so excited. It was from Nicole, so thank you, thank you, thank you. I did promise a book back, so I'm gonna have to get a tarot book for our swap, but yeah, I'm loving it. And I'm hogging the conversation again. Can you tell I'm
Well,
really in love with my community? I'm in love with my community.
I just want to put out there, I don't want this to sound one-sided in any way, shape, or form, but as of the time of this recording, I have not yet had my Samhain ritual with my coven. So I can't brag about it because it hasn't happened yet. And it's not that I don't love them and it's not that they're not fabulous. I mean, it's not you,
I know.
but
That's the one missing
I just
piece.
can't brag about it because it hasn't happened yet.
That's okay. You guys do cool stuff.
We do. We're just a little more ceremonial than you, that's all.
Except when it comes to snacks afterwards. Has there
Oh my
been
God.
any honey corn chip dipping happening lately? This
We
sounds like stoner witch coven snacks. I'm just saying.
seriously, like my coven eats the best shit.
I don't remember what episode it is. If future Layla figures it out, I will put a link. But in a past episode, we did talk about Chelle's coven and their cakes and ale ceremony. And I think the person that was supposed to bring one of your traditional snacks couldn't make it.
Yeah, couldn't come, and
So you
next thing you know,
substituted. You substituted corn chips for the cornbread you usually had.
right, and you still had to use the honey, so it's corn chips and honey, man. Let's do this.
It was surprisingly fantastic,
It
if I
freaking
remember
was.
correctly.
It freaking was. But yeah, so I'm not bragging only because it hasn't happened yet, but I still love them.
I love them too.
Back to God.
But the thing is in our covens, we have men and women. We have everybody. There's room for all of us here.
We got people. That's what we got. We got people.
We have people. And that's the thing is deities are aspects of people. They're aspects of nature and of these bigger cycles. And relating yourself to where you are in these aspects, or, with the youth god, if you want to start something new, maybe the youthful god energy, maybe you need to call Sol the sun god
Right.
and ask for that energy so that you can start something new.
How many of us have done rituals for new beginnings, whether that's new beginnings at a job or new beginnings in life, or hell, new beginnings as far as having a baby, buying a house, whatever the case may be? Why wouldn't you use a god for new beginnings?
Exactly. And the idea of growth doesn't have to be plants and growing things.
Could be personal growth.
Exactly. Personal growth. It could be growing your family, growing your business, growing your home, growing your connection of friends, whatever type of growth you want. If you need energy to start something new, that seed of beginning, that potential energy, call a youthful god. They're all about the newness. And one of the things you said earlier about the god reminding you of growing plants, like the new things bursting,
Yeah.
reminded me of Raven Grimassi is an Italian spiritualist, and they've written a book, and they talk about the youth god. There's a lot of different names for these three aspects, and a common one is youth warrior sage. Raven uses the hooded one for youth, the horned one, and the old one for the elder. The idea of the hooded one is the green man. So growing things and plants, just like you had said earlier.
That makes sense. The green man, the horned god, the
Yeah.
sage. Yeah.
The green man isn't that baby aspect. So that might help you sometimes to see the two different sides of the youth as the child and the young man. I mean, the green man appears to me as a much older youth.
Right.
Sorry, Matt. Like Matt, because, because he's a young man. He's not technically a youth. He's a person with responsibilities who is taking on more responsibilities while still honoring the creativity, energy, and optimism of youth. His life right now seems to fit into the stage of the young god, who is also the father warrior god.
Yeah.
I guess my point is that if you look at the god cycle as the whole wheel of the year, it's easier that way to look at it as like a sliding scale. We all fall into those in-between spots between youth and adult and sage, or, somewhere on that wheel. It's very rare that we'll fit neatly into one of those boxes. And the gods don't fit neatly into boxes either. These stages are more like a sliding scale.
I love that. Like, so the youth aspect can range anywhere from soul to the green man.
Exactly. Yes. That little baby aspect, all the way from the baby in the womb.
Yeah.
That first spark of life is the youth god, that spark.
Yeah.
And so part of the wisdom of the fool, part of the wisdom of the youth is that kids aren't afraid to fall off their bike and get back on again. And sometimes when we get older, we get scared to fall off our bike because it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
We might chip a tooth or break a bone or something, you know? So we don't want to go through that pain. But youth almost will fall off the bike, jump back up on it, and try the ramp again.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you need to recapture that energy. Sometimes you need that. He's not just birth and growth. There's wisdom in trying and failing and getting up
There's
again.
wisdom in change and challenge. There's
Yeah.
wisdom in change and challenge.
And there's wisdom in failure and keeping on doing it anyway, trying it
Yep.
a different way, trying it again,
Trial and error.
readjusting. Exactly. Exactly. That's that youth energy to me, is that not being afraid to fail and not being afraid to try.
So I think really the important thing, the biggest takeaway is not only should you be diving into the god as much as you are the goddess, but all three aspects, or you're shortchanging yourself.
There's so much fabulous, wonderful energy. And we need that balance. We need to honor all of these aspects of ourselves. And I don't think we do usually.
I would think as far as calling in the youthful aspect of the god, kind of have it be a little more playful. When I call in the maiden aspect, it's more, I try to think of calling in the maiden is evoking my teenage self. So for me, and you've changed my perspective tonight. I always thought of it as invoking that burst of beginning, that burst of newness, the beginning of the heat, the beginning of the warmth. But now I'm taking it, I'm going to have to take a step back because I know how I would invoke the Green Man, and I kind of never really thought, I kind of thought it was the Green Man and the Horned One kind of in that same
Well, they
category, not
kind
the
of
Green.
are. I mean, the Green Man kind of walks that line between both of them. So does Cernunnos. So does the Horned One. I mean, you can see Cernunnos as the button buck.
A younger aspect, but then
Yeah.
closer to the sage aspect.
If you didn't grow up in the backwoods of upstate New York and have a hunter for a father, a button buck is the very young buck. They have the little teeny tiny, just little tiny bumps on the top of their head. Think Bambi from Disney before he gets the full rack of antlers. A button buck has little tiny buttons of horns on his head. That is also Cernunnos, but that's him in his youthful aspect.
But he's also Cernunnos with the big full rack,
Oh,
the
he's
eight
hot
point buck.
Cernunnos with the shoulders and the rack and the asking you to walk the forest paths with him in the moonlight. Yeah, that's Cernunnos. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the youthful aspect, though, is that cute little button buck in the field that's bouncing around, having a good old time, playing with the skunk and the bunny, right? But he's also the responsible, almost adult that's about to set off on his first adventure. So when you call upon him or want to honor him, you can think of him in any of those aspects. From the young god as the first spark of life, the baby, the preteen, and the almost adult. Any of these aspects are the youth god. And you can set up your altar to reflect his qualities of beginnings, of adventure, of life. You don't have to settle for just one quality of that aspect.
So now I kind of would look at it a little differently, I guess, because I'm used to, invoking that energy, but never thought of it as the youthful aspect.
Try new things. Put fresh green things, bright green on your altar. Green scents. Sun, like I love that you kept mentioning the sun, little suns, dawn, working with new beginnings.
This is also would be where I would maybe use seeds too, because like I said, I think of it as kind of, that spark of beginning, that burst of growth. So seeds would be also something I would put on my altar as a representation. I do have it's the cutest darn thing. It's a little baby. And it used to be my grandma's little baby Jesus in her Christmas, what do they call that thing?
Manger,
Nativity
nativity.
scene. And so it was my grandma's little baby Jesus. And I don't know how I acquired it when she died, but I ended up with just the little baby Jesus, not the nativity scene.
Well, he is the sun god that's
He
born
is
at
the sun
Yule.
god.
Yeah.
So I have used that little baby Jesus on my altar as a representation of the sun god.
I like that.
It's like a ceramic thing, and he's like laying in a little straw manger. It's actually kind of cute.
It's adorable.
But that is what I have used is kind of like an altar representation.
Typically, I see him as more as the young man, the youthful man, that's getting ready to go off on his first adventures. So, you could even see that as someone that's college aged, getting ready to go off on college is still the youthful god.
Well, and I do have a youthful looking Cernunnos statue that maybe I'll see if that gives me some of that
Yeah.
youthful phase energy.
Some gods, like some goddesses, can have all of those aspects in themselves.
Right.
Take Lugh, for example. Lugh is the Celtic god of crafts, right? He's clever, and his story is kind of a coming of age story, right? So he's definitely the youth going up to father to warrior.
Right.
So for Lugh, one of the things that I could use to represent him as the youth might be a craft that I'm just starting to learn. Maybe I'm trying a new stitch in crochet, or let's face it, I kind of suck at crocheting. It doesn't matter how long I've been doing it, I'm still a dabbler. So maybe I'm trying something new, a new craft, and I might put that on my altar as a representation of Lugh. It doesn't have to be a literal representation.
I have another weird thing. You know how I get weird about things. I generally find working with this aspect of the god kind of a seasonal thing, truly.
In the spring,
Well, yeah, but like once its season's over, like I don't generally dabble with the youthful aspect of the god in, say,
yeah.
late August. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe it's because some witches don't see the power or potential in youth. Sometimes people see youth and innocence and think less powerful and less useful to their life right now. But there's importance in all stages of life, in all of these qualities, no matter where you're at in your stage of life. And I think it's too easy to get stuck in that duality, especially as adults. You want to forget the kid part, right? You want to stay with the two, the young adult and the sage. Two, morning to afternoon, afternoon to night.
Right,
Two,
right,
two aspects. You can break
right.
it up into three, but it's the oak king, it's the holly king, it's almost four gods, right? The oak king is really the baby god growing up to the youth, to the young man becoming the father. And then he switches and he becomes the sage. But he's still the young man. He's still the father. He's still vibrant and bright. And now he's going down. He's becoming the death god. He's sacrificing himself on that wheel of the year and then continuing along the wheel back to the spark of life as the newly conceived baby, as the newly conceived god. So it's almost like there's four, if you really want to look at it.
It's funny you say that because, some folks look at the four aspects of the goddess as the maiden, mother, warrior, crone,
Mm-hmm.
and in that specific order. But with the god, I could see the four aspects being the youth, the warrior, the father, the crone. And I think that for whatever reason, I feel like with the goddess, she becomes the mother and then the warrior. And with the god, he's the warrior who becomes the father. And it maybe is because it's that baby youthful stage, and the warrior maybe is what I see as that late teen, early 20s kind of stage.
I mean, it's really like a wheel, like we were saying earlier. And
Right.
so wherever you want to kind of divide that wheel, it's kind of like trying to figure out where Gen X and Millennial and Gen Z, where the dividing year is. You kind of figure out which stage of the god you want to section out and work with
Right.
someone with that kind of aspect. You can kind of pick anywhere on there and divide it into 2, 3, 4, however you want to do it.
Whatever works for you, man.
Yeah, right. It's also a good idea to remember that not only are the stages not exactly linear, they're also not literal. For you and I, we are both mothers. So that fits, right? Well, I know a lot of people our age who aren't mothers, who don't
Right.
want to be mothers, who have zero desire to be a mother, or who wanted to be and couldn't for whatever reason. And mother energy doesn't have to mean bearing children.
Right.
Mother energy can mean so many other things. It can mean protective, it can mean nurturing, it can mean growing new things. And so I really wish we could come up with different names for the phases that maybe were a little more modern. It made a lot of sense when I was a kid, but I think we've kind of outgrown them. I think we've kind of grown up a little bit. We need something a little new and different, which is also why I think the fourth face of the goddess is getting more. I mean, I know we'll talk about this in a later episode, but the four faces
Kind of been
just
getting more traction.
yeah, because the warrior aspect of women is very important. We need to embrace that. And I think the idea of mother and father, even though I think they're outdated terms, they do kind of fit, especially if you look at them as their archetypal energies and not as literal mom and dad.
But I think they're both separate from that warrior aspect as well.
I totally agree. And I love seeing that it is four, but I think it's hard enough for people to separate the god into three parts. instead of
I
2.
loan 4.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with 3, and then we'll ease people into 4. Shell. We're gonna we'll just start with the 3, get them used to the idea, and then we'll throw that 4th one on them later. We're not gonna make it an 8-part series now. We already said 7. Damn it. On that note, well, I think that's it for talking about the youthful god. And again, if there's a god like Lugh or Apollo, Pan or Carnunos, Dionysus, Angus Og, a lot of these will fit other aspects of the god as well. Youth, warrior, or sage. They're very rarely going to be just one. You could say, hey, that seems more like a warrior god or more like a father god. Yeah, okay, sure, probably.
Whatever works.
Whatever works. But if he's got that youthful aspect, whether physically or mentally, if he's got that new beginnings, that ready to accept a challenge and start new fresh things, that still fits with that youthful god aspect.
And, another thing for all you tarot enthusiasts, God always turns something into tarot. You can even, if you're struggling on finding a youthful aspect of the god to pull on the Fool.
The Fool is the one that I go to almost every single time for the young god.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I will use the sun as well to represent any aspect of the god, from the youth to the warrior to the sage. Sometimes the sun card in tarot gives off that god kind of energy.
Right.
I do like occasionally pages or knights work, but that doesn't give me god energy so much as major arcana does. So
yeah.
But the Fool just really embodies that so much, that leaping off into that unknown, that willingness to take the chance.
Carefree.
That carefree energy that can be so powerful, that new beginning energy, that rebirth from death energy that is so, so vital and powerful. On that note, thank you so much for joining us for this first of our 7-part series on the aspects of the god and goddess.
This is what happens when you like our first series. We do more.
Yeah, that's true. Don't encourage us, people. We just tend to go in weird places. But yeah, we were having a lot of fun with this. It's an excellent topic. So thank you all so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, give us some stars, some reviews. It really helps the show out, helps people to find us, and it makes Shell and I cackle like little witches.
Stay wise, stay wicked.
And keep it witchy.